Middle of the stage, we have Mr. Che Chen-chung, Chief Superintendent of PPRB. On his left-hand side, Mr. Kong Wing-chung, Senior Superintendent of the PPRB. And on his right-hand side, Mr. Chen Chi-yong, Senior Superintendent of Business Services Bureau. On the left-hand side of the stage, we have Mr. Lee Kwai-wah, Senior Superintendent of Organized Crime and Crime Bureau. And in the far right end of the stage, we have Mr. Wang Wai-shen, Senior Superintendent of Operations Bureau. Thank you. In the past 3 months, peaceful demonstrations have gradually descended into extreme violence, and the weapons used by protesters have become more and more deadly. They use weapons such as bricks, air guns, petrol bombs, and even sharpened metal posts to attack police officers. The risks faced by front officers are higher and higher, and they have to be vigilant at all times. Apart from violence that may happen in public events, we've noted that people with different views may end up in arguments and escalate to fights from time to time. As I said in the press conference in mid-August, people may like to express their views on walls or public places using posters or memo sticky notes on so-called nano walls. And these places are relatively high-risk places because very often there can be arguments and fights and even assaults happening at such places. And this has spread to so-called human chains formed in the community. People may have different views, and they might be affected by noise of these activities and like to resort to violence to express their discontent. And the police are very concerned and worried about the law and all the issues associated with such activities. The rule of law is something we take pride in as part of our core value, and I don't think the public would like to see violence from any parties. Many people do not agree that we should resort to violence to express their aspirations, and they want calm to be restored in Hong Kong as soon as possible. To defend the rule of law and law and order in Hong Kong, we need the concerted efforts of everyone in Hong Kong. They should work with the police force to combat violence and stop the chaos. And I think we have reached a very pressing situation. In the past, the police have received views from the public asking for more channels to be provided for members of the community to provide information to help detect crimes. In response, we are now introducing 10 anti-violence hotlines to allow members of the public to give us intelligence to combat violence. And the purpose is to combat violence and to restore calm to Hong Kong as soon as possible. I must reiterate that we don't encourage people to go to scenes of violence in order to get such information. Rather, the hotlines are just another means to allow members of the public to provide information related to violence to the police. In an emergency, we still encourage members of the public to call the 999 hotline. Mr. Chen is going to provide more information on the anti-violence hotline in a moment. We also appreciate that the public are concerned about our allowing all police officers to carry extendable batons of duty. Mr. Chen will comment on this later. Now I'd like to defer to Mr. Kong to talk about the number of arrests in the past few days. Yes, I'd like to comment on the number of arrests. As Mr. Xi mentioned, we take all violence crimes very seriously, and we will fully investigate all these crimes in order to punish all the culprits. Last Friday, a reporter of an online media was attacked. And then earlier on, we have arrested one male aged 64 for assault or occasionally bodily harm at Yamate Wholesale Fruit Market, and we've asked our criminal crime unit of Yao Qim to follow up. And then just yesterday, around 7 a.m., someone had a dispute with a human chained from outside a secondary school in Tuen Mun, and that man pointed a cutter at the students. The police, on receiving a report, arrived on the scene and arrested a 62-year-old man for possession of offensive weapon and has been charged with 1 count of possession of offensive weapon, and he appeared in Tumu Magistracy this morning.
Well, in the morning of yesterday, the 9th of September, a male appeared outside the school in Kowloon Bay, and an altercation ensued with students forming human chain outside, and the male wielded a 5-inch cutter, and when a teaching staff went forward to mediate, his hand or arm was cut, and the Sao Mau Ping Criminal Investigation Team took over and checked the CCTV footage. Subsequently, the police went to the male's residence and arrested him for wounding. This 65-year-old male was brought to Kwun Tong Magistracy for mention for the charge of wounding. So much for the arrest details yesterday. There is also a court case that I'd like to refer to. On the 14th of July, a 22-year-old male was suspected of assaulting a police officer at Sha Tin New Town Plaza. Earlier on, we already laid charges against him, including disorderly conduct in a public place, assaulting a police officer, and wounding. And this afternoon, he was brought to Sha Tin Magistracy for mention. The police did not use ammunition yesterday, and in yesterday's operation, no police officer suffered an injury. Next, I'll give the floor to Superintendent Wong. Thank you. Next, I'd like to give you details in relation to the distribution of extendable batons to off-duty officers. I'd like to give you more details. First of all, I'd like to point out that for off-duty police officers, they can be equipped with police gear, and this is not a new arrangement. Some of our colleagues do have pistols with them round the clock, and I think this is understood by the public. In the face of operational needs, on a regular basis, the police does review the equipment provided to frontline police officers, and this also includes introducing or changing suitable equipment for police officers. In the past 3 months, in different violent protests, we've seen protesters escalating the use of violence, including the committing assaults, attacking different people, attacking police stations, public facilities, hurling of petrol bombs, and setting fires. These acts definitely pose a serious threat to public safety and order. In view of this, the police is of the view that there is a need to further equip police officers with appropriate equipment so that even when these police officers are off duty, in the face of emergency, if there is a need for them to execute their official duty, they can protect the public in a more direct and efficient manner. There are details relating to operational strategies, and these details cannot be disclosed at the press conference. In relation to the use of force by the police, all along we have laid down very clear guidelines and we have provided training to our officers. I'd like to reassure the public about this. So much for my report. Next, I'll take the floor to give you details about the new arrangements of the anti-violence hotline. With changes in society and the habits of the public, we, from time to time, review the different channels of receiving reports from the public. We also would like to receive information on combating crimes. Since the 1950s, we have set up the 999 hotline, and we have also set up other channels of reporting crimes. such as receiving letters or the hotline 25217171, and also various report rooms in police stations for receiving reports. And the police have been keeping up with the times with the use of social media to distribute anti-crime messages. For example, we have the police mobile app for public downloading. We also have the police's Facebook page and Instagram. And in recent years, we've also set up a WeChat Instagram channel to disseminate anti-crime messages. With the recent social unrest in the past 3 months and the escalation of violence, we have received more and more requests from the public for the police to restore order in society, and there is also a wish for the police to disseminate anti-crime message and to allow more channels for the public to provide information to the public. And there is also a request for anonymous reports to be made to the police, and that is why we have set up 10 WhatsApp telephone hotlines. Starting from 55669500, there will be 10 different telephone lines starting with 55669500 to 9509, with the last digits changing from, say, 9500 to 9501 all the way to 9509. These 10 WhatsApp telephone lines would receive reports on curbing violence and stopping the chaos. There is no need to make a pre-booking or registration. It can be used simply by sending a WhatsApp message. The only important thing is to look for a genuine police hotline number before sending the message. And there are several points we must note, and that is anti-violence information will be received only via this WhatsApp number, and we do allow the transfer of images and audio, visual materials, but it will not be highly interactive, and no update will be provided on the investigation of crime. For other normal reporting of crime, members of the public should approach the police stations or call 999 hotline. We have 10 WhatsApp telephone lines from 55669500 and then to 55669501 all the way to 9509. Another point is we will not ask for personal particulars via the number, and we will not disclose your particulars or the information you've provided to a third party. This is to facilitate the members of the public to provide intelligence and information to the police relating to the stopping of violence. So these are the specific WhatsApp telephone hotlines. For further inquiries, members of the public should go to our website police.gov.hk or approach our police stations nearby. We are providing additional WhatsApp telephone numbers, but this is not a new concept. As we mentioned, we do have different channels such as 999 hotline. Due to public inquiries, we are now providing additional channels for members of the public to provide information to us. Let me give some concluding remarks. Although during the day yesterday there were a handful of violent incidents due to different opinions, the police managed to swiftly brought the suspects to justice. But I believe many people would feel the calmness that we had last night had been something that had not been experienced for a long time. As I said yesterday, in order to maintain prosperity and safety in Hong Kong and to restore peace in Hong Kong, apart from the police's work, we also need cooperation from the public. I would appeal to all citizens to make good use of the hotlines so that we can curb violence and stop the chaos together. The police will continue to investigate different violent incidents in an impartial manner.
In certain incidents, we saw reckless destruction of properties and brutal attack on police officers. Apart from extensive road blockage, some protesters repeatedly charged police cordons with different kinds of offensive weapons, like bricks, long sticks, metal poles, and petrol bombs. As a result, our officers are constantly on heightened alert, on and off duty. In the community, many people post sticky notes on walls of pedestrian walkways to express their views. Very often, we see arguments break out at these locations, sometimes descending to fighting and assaults. Recently, we have also seen people forming human chains outside schools and residential neighborhoods. Differences in political views sometimes give rise to conflicts and even violent clashes. We certainly respect citizen freedom of speech and their right to express their views. But we appeal to all members of the public to adopt a peaceful and rational means of expression in the interest of public safety. Just now, our officers just announced two new measures for the public and our officers to help restore public safety. Here, I'll briefly explain in English. First, in the interest of operational efficiency, we have approved all police officers to carry extendable batons of duty. We have seen an increase in the intensity and intensity of violence used by protesters. Their radical acts have intensified with more dangerous and sometimes deadly weapons used. Such violence has extended from protest sites to transport facilities like MTR stations and the Hong Kong International Airport. So in case of emergency, which is often unpredictable, there is a need for officers to better equip to respond to such situations. These new measures enable our officers to enforce the law and protect public safety even when they are off duty. Also, our officers will follow the strict internal guidelines on the use of force using these arms. As for the second measure, the police always appeal to members of the public to cut ties with violent and criminal elements. We hope the public will stand with us to stamp out violence. We must stop violence to safeguard Hong Kong's core value, the rule of law. Many citizens have different ideas and suggestions on how to restore Hong Kong public safety. We certainly welcome their views. Therefore, we have set up 10 WhatsApp telephone hotlines for citizens to report some non-urgent violent incidents. We hope through these new measures, members of the public can come together to combat violence. Now I'll move on to arrest figures. Yesterday, we arrested one 62-year-old man for possession of offensive weapons and one 65-year-old man for wounding. They were involved in violent incidents outside secondary school on two separate occasions. And a 64-year-old man was also arrested for assault occasioning actually bodily harm. He was involved in a violent incident against an online media reporter in Yau Ma Tei area on 6th of September. In conclusion, yesterday was relatively peaceful with only minor clashes. Our officers strictly arrest the offenders and restore public order. I believe most people would long for peace in society. We must reject violence to restore safety. It takes two to tango. Both the police and the public have a role to play in restoring public safety. We hope citizens will make good use of the anti-violence hotline to report information on acts of violence. In the meantime, we will continue to enforce the law professionally and impartially. Thank you.
嚟緊落嚟會到我哋嘅泛民
Q&A session now. Cable TV. Good afternoon, Cable TV. I'm concerned about the 8:31 incident in Prince Edward Station. There was a press conference on this early in the morning, but I'd like to seek some clarifications. First, we've been saying that there were 7 wounded in the incident and hospitalized, and FSD confirmed that for the 3 sent to Yau Ma Tei, they were sent to hospitals in 2 batches, and the 2 were not related. However, some screenshots were released by the MTR this morning. At 11:09, a train reached Yau Ma Tei Station, and that was after riot police went into Yau Ma Tei Station. And after a while, ambulancemen sent the 3 injured to the hospital. And according to the screenshot, we saw them escalated, accompanied by 3 riot police officers riding the escalators. I'd like to know whether that was related to the incident in Prince Edward Station or not. If yes, that means there were at least 3 wounded in the incident. That's the first question. And the second is also related to Prince Edward Station. It said that 53 were arrested in that station and then 10 were arrested in Yamate. I'd like to know how many of them wounded were involved in the Prince Edward Station incident. And for Yamate, the 3 injured were arrested. I'd like to know whether they've been charged or unconditionally released. And then there was a lady who was wounded in her left eye, right eye, and then she was said that the police has been given information, has sought a warrant to obtain medical reports of the lady, and then she's going to seek an appeal. First, on the Prince Edward Station incident, I will say a few words about the first and second question. I'll pass on to Mr. Lee. And then the third question involving the lady with a wounded right eye, also for Mr. Lee. This morning, MTRCL released some screenshots to explain the situation. And at an earlier press conference, we said very clearly that at Prince Edward Station, 7 wounded were sent to Lai Chi Kok Hospital, or sent to the hospital through Lai Chi Kok Station. And then 10 were arrested, and then 3 were injured, and they were sent to the hospital for treatment. So 7 plus 3 adds up to 10. So for the 3, I think they were sent from Prince Edward Station to Yamate, but whether they were wounded at Prince Edward Station or elsewhere, we have to confirm later. But we can confirm that at Prince Edward Station, there were 7 injured, sent to Lai Chi Kok Station and further to hospital. And then at Yamate Station, there were 3 injured, sent to hospital for treatment and accompanied by police officers. Regarding the 3 injured, yes, they've been arrested. But information on the arrest and also the situation of the 10 arrested in Yamate, I defer to Mr. Lee.
According to information at hand, they've been given bail. They have yet to be given bail. They have yet to be released on bail. And let me say something more about the granting of a warrant by court in relation to the lady with injury in the right eye. In relation to the injured person, we're not sure about the details. The arrangement of the court warrant is this. According to Section 50(3) of the Police Force Ordinance, we can apply with the court for a warrant after affirmation or under oath. And in executing the court warrant, the organization which could provide such data would be the subject of the execution of the court warrant. And on this occasion, it is the hospital authority which is in possession of the information. There is therefore no such need to disclose details of the court warrant to a third party. So let me just explain the details of the application and execution of the court warrant. Sorry, the speaker is not coming through. In relation to the 3 persons in Yamate Station being arrested and released on bail, can you tell me about the offences for which they were arrested? And are all these 3 persons related to Prince Edward Station? Because the riot police were escorting them in the station as the ambulance crew took them to hospital. Well, regarding these details, I would say that their arrest was related to what happened in Prince Edward Station. As for the actual charges, I need to refer to further information. I don't want to give inaccurate information. Please, let's move on to the next question, please. Next one. Xinhua Agency. First row. I have two questions. First, relating to the lady with the injury in the right eye, can the police tell us about the progress of investigation? In relation to a spate of violent incidents in which protesters vandalize public properties, what measures does the police have? Now, about the case of injury in Tsim Sha Tsui, I will invite Mr. Lee to take the question. About public facilities, Mr. Kong can take the question. About the person with a right eye injury, the latest update of the investigation is that we already obtained the medical report from the hospital authority. Together with the evidence that we have gathered, we can compare and contrast the two sets of information. But the most important thing is we'd like the person in question to provide more details about what happened that day, including what she was doing and details of herself in relation to other protesters at the scene, including the distance, which could help us grasp the full picture. As we have seen on different occasions, we've seen rioters or protesters vandalizing public properties such as TV screens, ticket machines, entry gates in MTR stations. As we've reiterated a number of times, the police do not condone such unlawful acts. As such, we have maintained close liaison with the MTR Corporation. And would also spare no effort in gathering information. We conduct risk assessments in relation to different public events. We assess the risk of whether facilities inside MTR stations would be vandalized, and we deploy appropriate level of manpower. And we also, at the same time, maintain close liaison with the MTR Corporation so that we could handle these matters properly. And if need be, the MTR Corporation would also approach us for assistance. And if any member of the public witness such unlawful and violent acts inside the MTR station, please report to us. We'll follow up on them. Now, about pursuing liabilities, of course, we will spare no effort in launching investigation into these violent and vandalizing acts. In the past few weeks, apart from these acts of vandalizing properties inside MTR stations, we have also actively followed up on other unlawful acts. So in relation to vandalism inside MTR stations, I would say that arrests would be made so that we can bring the offenders to justice. Commercial Radio. I'd like to follow up on the extendable batons. But there is a suggestion that up to 10,000 extendable batons would be distributed, which is a large quantity. Under what circumstances would police officers use extendable batons? And is it necessary for a police officer to display the warrant card before using a baton? And how do we make sure that an off-duty police officer would still abide by the police general or standing orders to make sure that there is no excessive level of force used? 3 questions. Please remind me if I failed to memorize all 3 of them. Under what circumstances would extendable batons be used? That's the first question, right? For extendable batons, as I mentioned just now, it is not something new. For criminal investigation unit colleagues, They are equipped with pistols around the clock. The only difference is that we are distributing batons for even off-duty police officers so that, if need be, they can be put to use. This is in accordance with Section 21 of Cap 232. I'm not going to read out the exact provision. In short, what it means is that for an off-duty police officer, if there is a need for him to execute a police duty, he would be regarded to be on duty. So, after a police officer goes off duty, if he encounters a law-breaking behavior individual, he may need to reveal his identity and execute his police duty. Whether police baton should be used depends on the circumstances. As we all know, after distributing batons to off-duty police officers, they cannot put the batons to casual use. And in fact, there are clear guidelines according to the Police General Orders 29. First of all, when the baton is used, before the baton is used, warning should be given as far as possible. The baton should be used only for achieving a purpose, and once that purpose is achieved, the use of the baton should be stopped. And that is clearly laid out in the guidelines. And about the off-duty officer showing his warrant card, again, this is according to the Police Force Ordinance Section 21 Cap 232. When a police officer is in the execution of his duty, he is exercising his police power. And in the course of that, any police officer, even an off-duty one, should reveal his identity and display his warrant card as far as practicable. There are two elements. First, it must be in the execution of his duty, and that is to arrest, say, a citizen and also to exercise his police power. And under those circumstances, he is required to reveal his identity. What's the third question? Can you allay the public's concern about the possible use of excessive force by the police? Because recently we've seen excessive force being used by the police in arresting protesters. Because we might very well have off-duty police officers around us. So can you allay the public concern? Let me put it this way. For off-duty police officers, they are totally different from undercover police officers in an operation. At normal times, you would often see off-duty police officers in the neighborhood. And that's the reason why we have this new arrangement, as explained by Mr. Wong. And also Mr. Wong just now mentioned, as far as the law is concerned, for an off-duty police officer to execute his police duty, he will immediately be regarded as being on duty as a police officer. So when the circumstances are appropriate and when the baton is required to be used, he will be subject to different internal guidelines, including the Police General Orders. I need to make it clear, like Mr. Wong said just now, when using the baton, the police officer will be required to reveal his identity. So this is very clear. This is to clearly show that he is exercising police power.
And as I said, every day you have civil servants or police officers or fire services officers of duty around you, and in different incidents. And you can see on the news, very often we have off-duty officers making arrests, helping to arrest criminals or even to help save lives. So that is part of our work. Whether our colleagues have this new equipment or not, if they are off duty and if there is an incident around them, it is their duty to take action. When there is any law-breaking behavior, they have to act, and our off-duty officers are always in this mentality. They will not turn blind eye to things happening around them, even if they are on duty. So there is no cause for concern. 01. Hong Kong 01. I'd like to ask about the extendable batons. You said that police officers will reveal their identity. How are they supposed to do so? Do they just tell us that they are police officers, or must they produce their warrants before we know that they are really police officers? And in using the extendable baton, do they have to make a report afterwards, after an incident? Now, if a police officer has used a baton to strike the head or neck of a person, how can we make a complaint? And I have to ask about the incident at Typo Market MTL station. A young boy was struck at the head and also neck by police officers. Well, this can be a fatal assault. I'd like to ask whether that is assault. Is it against your guidelines? Mr. Kong will take first and third question. Mr. Wong will, and then I will supplement. Mr. Wong, first, whether there is any guideline for our officers to use their extendable batons and whether they have to make a record afterwards. We have very clear guidelines in our police regulations. As I said, when they use the baton, they are exercising their police power, and then if force is used, they have to make a record. In our PGOs, we have established procedures and guidelines for them to follow, so you don't need to worry. As regards how police officers can make a record, is it something new? It is not. Well, if a police officer is off duty, and if he just take out his extendable baton and attack, does that mean that he doesn't have to make a record? Well, if a police officer who is off duty has to use his baton, that means he is exercising his police power. He is on duty. You have to understand that if someone or an officer show his baton in public, it can be seen. There is no need for you to make a report because it can be videotaped. So this is a fact. So if a police officer has to use his baton, and if he has followed entirely the guidelines, then he is exercising his duty. He will not just take it out and then hide it afterwards, because as soon as he shows it, it will be seen. As regards how we can trace the records and trace the officer who has used his baton off duty, since he has used his baton off duty to exercise his police duty, then I'm sure the target will not just leave. And I don't think the police officer will just leave as well. There must be follow-up action. The officer will have to record the factors taken into account and the reasons for him to escalate force. We have guidelines for our officers to use force. It must be justified. As regards whether the police officer can be traced, I think he should be able to be traced. Well, what if he doesn't show us his warrant? I don't know whether the person concerned is really a police officer. Oh, you talk about the warrant. Let me supplement. If an off-duty officer has to use his baton, I'm sure the target is not just a member of the public. He must be a lawbreaker, because if no one has broken the law, there is no need for us to use force. So if a person has broken the law and a colleague has to use his baton, then, as I said, he is discharging his police duty and he has to show his warrant. We've said a number of times that where feasible, our colleagues will display their warrants. Let me quote a general example. If an off-duty officer has made an arrest, somebody has stolen something, and an off-duty officer gives chase, and then he has to tell him that I'm a police officer, I now arrest you. But the situation must permit that to happen. For instance, if that person is escaping and he is not yet under control or subdued, then we have to wait for uniformed branch officers to arrive, and then when the situation permits, the warrants will be shown. There is no question of concealing his identity. An off-duty officer will not play with his equipment. If he has produced his equipment, that means some crime has taken place and he has to discharge his duty. Let me supplement. Police batons is just one of our options of force. And an off-duty police officer or a police officer on duty, when someone is trying to escape, then calling him to stop or using bare hands to control him is a kind of force as well. So the extendable baton is just another option. So there's no question of the records going wrong because of the distribution of extendable batons to off-duty officers. The situation will not be complicated. It's just that there will be an additional option for our off-duty officers. And when force is used, we have a very stringent mechanism for it to be recorded, and the officer will have to explain later why he has used force, and he can rely on that record. So after force is used, a colleague will have to make records, and we have very clear guidelines for that to be done, and this is a normal procedure. As regards the the incident in Tai Po Market yesterday in our press conference, I explained very clearly. Because at the Tai Po Market MTL station, there was serious violence and vandalism of facilities, so our officers arrived in response. According to the record, when they arrived, they saw people running away, and then they went into the station targeting at certain persons. The man in blue you referred to was running. We shouted at him to stop. He didn't comply with that order, and then the police officers used force to arrest him, and then he was arrested for unlawful assembly. In relation to the case, we have received one complaint, and we are now approaching the relevant persons to collect more information, and we will handle that according to established mechanism in a fair manner. So both the criminal incident and the complaints are being dealt with under our formal procedures. I have nothing more to add. Outage K3.
Just now you mentioned about the police batons. Could you just clarify whether
Can you speak a
could
bit
you just
louder?
clarify whether it's true that the police will give out batons to off-duty officers? How many of these officers will be given the batons, and under what circumstances could they use these batons? And people are worried about the abuse of power by the police, and they're also worried about the use of excessive force. How would you allay the concerns that by giving these batons to these off-duty officers, they would abide by the police general orders? And also, you talked about the setting up of the WhatsApp channels. Could you explain what's the purpose of setting up these new channels, and does that mean that people can now make reports anonymously? And are you encouraging people to also expose the identities of protesters?
I'll invite Mr. Wong to answer the first two questions, and Mr. Chen to answer the last one.
Yes. Regarding to your first two questions, In view of the current situations, the need for police officers to perform their duties while off duty has significantly increased. Under Section 21 of the Police Force Ordinance, Chapter 232, every police officer shall, for the purpose of this ordinance, be deemed to be always on duty when required to act as such, and shall perform the duties and exercise the power granted to him under this ordinance or any other law at any and every place in Hong Kong where he may be doing duties. Owing to the operational reasons and after serious considerations, the force senior management have decided to allow off-duty officers to be issued with extendable patents. The number of it, I'm sorry I can't tell you because of the operational reasons, but for the purpose of executing duties is actually our aim. All right? Maintaining law and order and public safety and public order while off duties is exactly our objective. All right? So how to avoid them to abuse the use of batons, as mentioned by Mr. Chair, the use of baton is just one of the choices. For off-duty police officers, when they face or when they see any offense happen, probably they will disclose their identities, and they will think about what level of force they have to use. It is according to the situations. We are not talking about to give an extendable baton to the off-duty officers and ask them to use whenever they have to execute their duties in their constabulary duties during their off-duty period. All right. So during their off-duties, if they have to work as a police officers, they still have to stick to the original use of force principle, and of course the force continuums. Right. So that's the answer of the first two questions.
Okay. Regarding the third question. The purpose of setting up this WhatsApp is to provide an additional channel to the member of the public. In fact, in the past few months, lots of the member of the public, they told us that they wish to contribute. And we request the police to offer a more effective way so that they could offer information. And they are welcome to provide crime information. That is only an additional information, nothing new. In fact, before this, you can provide information under the crime information directly, either email, e-report room, or even personal providing to the report room. And they are welcome to provide information and intelligence related to riots, lawful assembly, or other form of social unrest incident. That's the question for question 3.
So they could make reports anonymously?
The purpose of this line is, the WhatsApp line is not making a report. If you want to make an official report, like, for example, any criminal activity, you are urged to report in a normal way. For example, go to report room or even the e-report room. However, that WhatsApp hotline is only providing an additional channel for you to submit information to the police. So under this WhatsApp line, we will not, in a very highly integrated manner, very interactive way, to communicate with the member of the public, and we will not handling a specific case for this particular WhatsApp.
So you won't require the members of the public to provide their own identities?
No, they are not required to provide identity.
下一條。
Next question, Apple Daily. Thank you. I'd like to ask about batons. Just now, Mr. Wong mentioned that warnings should be given as far as possible with the use of with the use of baton, and then once the purpose has been achieved, the use of baton should stop. And relating to typo incident outside Winghua Cake Shop, members of the public had their upper body being hit by the police with batons incessantly. They put up no resistance, they just raised their arms. So about the use of baton by police officers in this occasion is already against the guidelines. And you also mentioned the use of baton in order to instruct them to squat because of the large number of protesters and that the police had to control the situation. From the footages, we saw that there were 15 police officers with only 11 protesters present. So there seems to be a discrepancy. Can you explain this? Next, I'd like to follow up on the lady. On the 11th of August, you mentioned that it is not necessary to explain to a third party contents of the court warrant. There is no need to disclose the medical report to anyone. I'm not asking about the medical report, but you should have viewed the report. I'd like to know the progress of police investigation, and can you tell whether the injury suffered by that lady is caused by a sock round fired by the police? And according to that female, she already approached the police with no reply. So what is your follow-up action? Third question, Mr. Chair yesterday mentioned that people suspected to be reporters attacked frontline police officers. Yesterday you mentioned that no information is available. So can you tell me something about this? Why didn't the police arrest that reporter in question for attacking a police officer? You mentioned that the people were disguised as reporters. And then for the 11th of August, well, your explanation regarding the 31st of August incident is that you need to have a further understanding as to whether the 3 people were injured inside Yamate Station, and that you subsequently said these 3 persons were also arrested in relation to Prince Edward Station, although you had no idea when they suffered the injury. Why don't you have information at this stage? Can't you tell whether they are related to Prince Edward Station incident? When will you be able to disclose the charges they face? And now you have CCTV footage disclosed. Will further footages be disclosed? Because we only have screenshots available at the moment, and those don't seem to be able to allay the public's concerns. The Apple Daily reporter asked 5 questions, and we're going to answer the first 3 questions, and other reporters can follow up on the remaining 2. Let me first take the second question, and then I will invite Mr. Wong to take the first question, and also to supplement my answer to question 2. And the other question I'll defer to Mr. Lee. First of all, I do not have the footages that you mentioned, whether there were 15 police officers and 11 protesters intercepted. I didn't count. But even if we just intercepted 11 protesters, it doesn't mean at that moment only 11 protesters were present in Taipo Market Station. From the footages, you should have seen that when the violent incident broke out and when there was extensive vandalism in Taipo Market Station, there were a large number of protesters vandalizing MTR properties. And by taking enforcement action, the police could round them up and also could chase after these violent protesters. Definitely, there were far more than 15 police officers chasing after 11 protesters. Perhaps in the end, only 11 protesters were intercepted. But at that time, the police were chasing after a large number of protesters. There was another footage. In fact, 1 male and 1 female were standing outside a shop with the gate closed. And at this stage, I can't tell you whether all 15 police officers were standing at that exact spot. From the footage, what I could see is that some police officers were standing in front of the male and female, and these people were instructed to squat, and then the use of force immediately stopped after they abided by our instruction. And police batons were indeed used, and we welcome any complaint in relation to use of force, and we will investigate and follow up on the matter professionally and impartially.
Let me refer to the figures first. On the footage, you said there were 15 officers against 11 persons intercepted. I beg to differ. I could only say that when police officers ran into the station, there were many people running away, and I can't even confirm whether just 11 were intercepted. Mr. Wong? Now, for the use of force, what are the considerations? What are the considerations in the mind of police officers? You have to understand that the past 3 months, and in dealing with the Sha Tin MTL station, typo market, where it was not ordinary stop and search operation. About 10-20 minutes ago, 300 people surrounded police officers, would not let them go. And then we received news that there was vandalism there, and we had to arrive at a place suffering from vandalism to stop it and to arrest the people. So we do not just consider that a snapshot you took. Now, there was surveillance, there were police officers, we gave verbal warning, and then we used the police baton. And so it was not just tit and tat. There was a process in between. We had to analyze when it should be used and whether it should continue. There are views that certain level of force should not continue, but it depends on whether we have achieved the purpose of stopping a certain act. And this is an ongoing analysis, and it is difficult. I do understand there are many questions, and we need time to address these questions. Otherwise, it will not be fair to other reporters present. I hope we can all have a fair chance. All right. I understand what you're talking about. What I mean is, well, if your purpose is to ask people subdued to squat, then it's all right to strike the lower limbs. Why do you have to strike his upper body? And is it really in keeping with your principle of using the minimal level of force, the exact position to strike, and whether it is reasonable? Now, I was trying to explain to you that it was a dynamic situation. Now, these are human beings. They will move. The most difficult challenge for police officers is the targets are not immobile objects. The objects will move. The question is, after the purpose is achieved, have our colleagues stopped? Now, as you said, somebody was wounded, and we gave first aid at once. But you have to understand that we are allowed to use force by the law, and it won't be comfortable for the recipient on the receiving end, because it was a violent clash and the police had to intercept them to ensure safety. It may be okay if people were just standing there, but it was a violent situation, and our colleagues had to require people to squat. There was so much information online, and then more than 300 protesters were there to stop our officers from leaving. So we had to ask them to squat to ensure that officers as well as other people will not be harmed. Otherwise, we won't be able to achieve the purpose. According to the footage, the people were standing still and with hands lifted up. So why did you strike their upper body? As I said, it depends on whether the purpose could be achieved. We wanted everyone to squat down first. So I really want to appeal to everyone. In such a confusing situation, you should not be there. And police instruction is for you to squat down, to freeze, and to put up your hands, and you should follow suit. We don't want to misunderstand you whether you are putting your hands into your pocket and you may take out something to harm us. Everyone should cooperate with the police at all times. We do not target at individuals. We must justify every use of force, and people should support the police as far as possible. There is no room for discussion, no negotiation. You must cooperate with the police at the scene, and then we can fulfill our mission safely. Before I take the third question, may I say that you referred to the 3 arrested in Yamate on August 31st. I will give you a reply in writing after the press conference. Because I don't have any information with me as to on what charges were they arrested, I want to be responsible and will give you information later. What about the case about the young lady? Of course. All right, you said the young lady has written to us. I don't think he has contacted us. I'm waiting for her response because our superintendent wrote to her on the 12th of August and she has yet to reply. I have said more than once. Our jigsaw puzzle is almost complete and the most important piece is still missing. I'd like to know how at 6:40 p.m., given the chaos, there were people using slings and also using petrol bombs. Why was she there on the 12th of August? What was her location? And what was her distance with other violent demonstrators? Now, if we have this information, we will have a clearer idea of what happened on that day. We're looking forward to her response, and we have given her our phone number, our email, and everything in the letter to her. You talked about a medical report. You've already read her medical report. After reading her medical report, can you confirm whether her wound, her injury in the right eye was caused by the police? No. Now, for a dead body, it can receive forensic examination. No, she is not a corpse. Yes, very correct. Yes, for facts of the case, we need her statement. I've made it very clear. Was she hit by a beanbag round? Regarding the medical report, first, I cannot disclose what's in the medical report. I need her statement before I could comment. Without a comment, without a statement, can you say that you cannot investigate the case? I wouldn't say so, but her statement is of utmost importance. I hope you understand that even we have the medical report, we cannot be definite. We have to consolidate everything, and this is the situation we're in, and that's why we need her to come out and tell us what was happening so that we can have a clearer idea of what was happening. Now, if you have follow-up questions, I understand that you have follow-up questions, but to be fair, I believe we have to go to the next question. Let me finish this first. I've done all I need to do, so you have checked. I cannot tell you what she said. Even before she has given statement, is it fair? For me, is it fair to the colleague? Is it fair to the injured person? She must come out and tell me what was happening at that time, at that location, to be fair.
Last 2 questions now. Good afternoon. I have a question regarding batons. Off-duty police officers are required to execute police duty. Well, if these police officers are off-duty, why would they need a baton to execute his police duty? Because he may be an average Joe in the street. We have no idea whether he's off-duty or not. What is the purpose of equipping him with a baton? Other reporters also asked about the use of force by giving officers batons. Because if they don't put down in a record, whenever they use a baton, there is no way to find out. Well, just now you mentioned that many people would witness the use of a baton, but it's a different matter whether they report to the force or not. How do you make sure that an off-duty police officer would make a record whenever the baton is used? And how are you going to follow up on these incidents which have been captured on video? The first question, please repeat. Nobody could identify whether somebody is an off-duty police officer in the street. So why should they be equipped with a baton? Is it because they are afraid of being attacked and that they must be equipped with a baton? It's not for defense. And as you put it, this is exactly the case. An off-duty police officer would never be identified in the street. There is no need, therefore, to equip himself with a baton for defense, because we just can't tell whether somebody is an off-duty police officer. We are talking about law-breaking behaviors happening everywhere, not just vandalism in MTR stations. Sometimes it could be some grudges among a group of people, and then some other people try to stop the law-breaking behavior, and then there is a confrontation between two groups of people. And in fact, it has happened in the past few days. An off-duty police officer may go forward to tell them to stop. We just want any incident to be handled as quickly as possible. We're not trying to stir up public emotions. On the contrary, we'd like to restore the public's confidence in the police in restoring order in society. We had a peaceful night last night, which is something we very much cherish. About the use of baton not witnessed by anyone, as I said just now, whenever the baton is used by an off-duty police officer, the police officer is immediately on duty. And this is not a new arrangement. For CIDs, they are equipped with pistols round the clock, and they are required to make reports whenever their equipment is used. Not to mention the fact that if a baton is used, definitely it will be seen by others. Can somebody just use a baton to hit somebody without being seen? It's impossible. So I think I've answered your question. Well, I understand that you have repeatedly asked questions about batons. I think the most important point is that for off-duty police officers, even when they go off duty, they will continue to maintain social order. And this is our tradition over the years. Just like reporters, even if you're off duty, if need be, you will still report the news. So I think we need to take things into context. We need to ask why there is so much violence in our society. Why is it that police officers now need an extra baton for effective enforcement of the law? Whenever a police officer is required to use a baton, definitely there is somebody on the receiving end being subject to the use of baton, so definitely this matter will be reported. And definitely the officer will be responsible for using this baton. As a responsible officer, a record or a report should be made. It's for his own protection. So definitely the police officer would make such a report. It's one of the options in exercising force. If a police officer going off duty has to act, definitely it's due to some law-breaking behavior. A record would be made to explain why force has been used and it's for his own protection. And I think that's all we have to explain. Even if you pursue this line of questions further, we'll give just similar answers. Next question, Ming Pao. About police batons, Mr. Wong, Mr. Chair, you both mentioned that you have established an effective guidelines and that you need to fill in the report in accordance with the necessary procedures. So, did any police officer fill in a form to report on the use of batons, the subjects on which the batons are used, what injuries, what part of the bodies of these subjects have been hit? Because you haven't given us any figures in your operations. So if you call it established and effective practice, please tell us. About the WhatsApp hotline, I'd like to ask Mr. Chen. Members of the public can provide information via WhatsApp to the police, and would the text, images, videos received be regarded as court evidence? Would it be incorporated into a criminal investigation? And is there anything to protect the privacy of individuals? Because at least you have the telephone numbers of informants. And is this a suggestion from the Security Bureau, or is this the arrangement implemented by the police itself? About the use of batons, we are very concerned because members of the public were subdued and lined up in Tai Po Market Station, and from images we see very clearly that they have been subdued and they were squatting, and the police officers still used batons to hit the upper parts of their bodies. I think at the outset I already explained the answers that you're looking for. For WhatsApp hot telephone lines, there is no need for a member of the public to provide personal particulars. In other words, there is no need to disclose his or her identity. The police will not disclose the identity of the person or the telephone number to any third party. Now, regarding your other questions relating to criminal investigation, Mr. Lee just now said he would like to supplement as well, so I'll give the floor to him. This is not really strange to us. We sometimes receive emails, letters with information for the police. And once we receive such information, we will never ask this individual to be a witness if he's reluctant. We may invite the person to make a statement, but if the person is reluctant to go further, it will be left with the police for further investigation. And for protection's sake, we will not disclose any personal data to a third party. This is all along the practice in dealing with investigation details.
Regarding the question you asked, the fact is there's just an additional channel for people to report to us. Even without these hotlines, people can call our number, send a letter to us, or go to our police report room. So it is just an additional measure. Regarding the situation at Tai Po Market Station, as I understand it, well, as I said, our colleagues were not dealing with a simple stop and search operation. Rather, there were people vandalizing the Tai Po Market Station, and we had to deal with very violent behavior. And our colleagues were asking people to squat down, and that was the purpose. And why batons were used? Because they had to consider the risks. Just a few minutes ago, there were more than 300 people besieging police officers, not letting them go. And then there were a lot of intelligence online. Different people might be carrying lethal weapons such as knives, and our colleagues were asking people to squat down. And the colleagues felt that it was an absolutely safe way. They don't have to worry. They didn't have to worry that someone might cut the neck with a sharp object. So when we deal with violent scenes, we have to bear the risks and we have to use appropriate force to achieve the purpose. And that's why we appeal to the public. You must cooperate with police officers at the scene. Now, it was just at the spur of the moment. We have to decide the type of force to use, and we have to continuously assess the situation to decide whether the level of force used is appropriate and whether it should continue. We have to make a decision within the split of a second, and you can understand the difficulties. If you do not want misunderstanding or unwanted injuries, you should cooperate with us as soon as possible to lower the risks to police officers there, and at the same time we can also lower the risks you're exposed to. And as for the record, it's not as simple as the number of how many times I have hit, and we have to describe the situation, the justifications, and why, and whether the purpose was achieved, and whether the force was stopped after the purpose was achieved. It was very difficult. Our colleagues have to work 12 hours a day, but it's in fact more than 12 hours, because after every time force has been used, records have to be made, and that's why our colleagues take pains to record such situations, to give them justifications, because every time force is used, our colleagues will have to bear the responsibility. Thank you. Speakers off mic.